All right, we have reached almost the end of our journey. Since today, in this particular lecture, I will teach the conclusion of the book, but then I have an appendix for you, so don't worry, this is not the last lecture. So, in conclusion, I have entitled this conclusion Grace in the Song of Songs. And I think this is very, very important at the end of this journey, after we've, walked a bit with the Shulamit, we've learned from her, we've gathered her wisdom. We know a little more now, perhaps, how to navigate, the beginnings of a relationship, boundary setting, navigating infidelity. We have learned some skills or some tools. We have gathered some tools on how to love well. The problem is that these tools very often they remain stuck in the mind. And when we are in an actual relationship, it's very easy to kind of lose this wisdom that we have acquired. One of the gifts of love is to kind of override the mind, isn't it? So even if you have a sense of what you ought to be doing and how you ought to be navigating, the emotions take over. And very often we fall short of the wisdom that we have learned and acquired. And, very often we, like the Shulamit, by the way, she's wise in her words, but not in her actions. Like the Shulamit, we can, rush and ruin everything. We can, become, we'll talk a little bit about all of her flaws in a second, but it's very easy to mess things up. And so no matter how, how intelligent we are, how wise we are, life kind of, the love will take over and we will inevitably at one point mess it up and not follow these beautiful um, insights that we have learned. So I would like to dedicate this particular lecture to all of those, all of, can't talk, all of us who have at some point messed up, ruined everything, walked, like a bull in a china shop in the relationship. Because all of us, because inevitably, anyways, the relationship will get messed up. So it never remains pristine and Edenic, Eden-like. So this is really for all of us who inevitably at some point will mess up and will ruin everything. So this is dedicated to all of us. So, and we are really in good company because the Shulamit herself has, really made some fatal mistakes, as well as her man. Both of them have really, really messed up. And what I find beautiful in this story is that in spite of us, in spite of the fact that they have messed up, they somehow, at the end of the story, receive this beautiful love, which is as strong as death. So I am very curious about this. This is, I think, one of the main teachings of the Song of Songs is that love is not something that you can earn. It's not something that you can attract with the proper behavior, actions. This love ultimately is a grace. So that's the topic for today. So let's look a little bit about how deeply the Shulamit has messed up, as well as her man, and then see what we can learn here from what is the author trying to tell us by writing a story with such flawed characters. So let's look a little bit at the Shulamit. The Shulamit messes up on many, many levels. So she messes up her own rules, right? And she messes up also when it comes to her the society's rules, her society's rules of engagement. So, for example, we know that in the patriarchal culture that she is in, it is not the woman who initiates the relationship, it is the father or the brothers. Here, she recklessly, runs out of the house. There is no father. She is the one really recklessly running into the arms of this man whom she does not know and who has a lot of issues. This is the perfect man that your mother has warned you against, right? We'll see that in a second. So, first of all, she initiates recklessly. There's no time to get to know him, who is really this guy. There's no time to, there's no conversations and coffees. She gets right to business. They get physical very quickly. They're rushing through all of the stages that are supposed to take place, that she herself talks about. Right? She talks about do not awaken love before it is ready. She's awakened in love way before it's ready. That man is not ready when she, throws herself in his arms. So she's breaking her own rules also. And then she's, of course, breaking the rule that, you're not supposed to, at least in the context of ancient Israel, it was not always enforced, but there were moments where, dating someone outside of your ethnicity, outside of your religion is not appropriate. And Kings, or whoever her, her man is, he's clearly a Hebrew, she's clearly not. She describes herself as dark-skinned, as a foreigner, as a stranger here among the people of her beloved. And so again, this is a relationship which is problematic. She's dating outside of her faith, outside of her ethnicity. And this is often prohibited in the biblical text, although there are phases where it's not prohibited, and then it's again prohibited. But in any case, it's a problem. Then she goes further and she initiates a very, very promiscuous relationship. This is also not okay in the context of patriarchy. I mean, and you see this even now in the rabbinical writings, and you are not supposed to touch before you are lawfully married to this person. Sometimes you don't even see the person until the marriage. So here she is, luring her beloved into the countryside. And believe me, it's not to pick apples, it's not to pick cherries. They are getting away from the scrutiny of their society so that they can do whatever they want. So we have here somebody who's very promiscuous. She's really not taking, she's not discreet, she's not modest. As she's supposed to be when it comes to touching. I mean, even today, if you go into Orthodox Jewish communities who are really inspired by the rabbinical writings on courtship, you are not supposed to touch until you're married. You can date, you can meet, you can talk, but you're not supposed to touch until your wedding night. So here she's really breaking with these traditions. So you can see here somebody who is very transgressive when it comes to her society's rules, and who is also breaking her own rules, because she is, the one who has taught us, to wait and to, kind of give space for the man to, come back. It is the one who is rushing into everything, and she is also very clingy, very needy, very kind of obsessive. She's not at all keeping to her own principle of, revealing herself a little at a time. She's not following her own rules of seduction. So really breaking every rule, her own rules, the rules of her society. She's a mess, to be honest. She's an absolute mess. When it comes to the man, he's no better. So he's, you can see him kind of like, I feel like he's suffering from what we would call in modern time, he's kind of an avoidant. Let me see if I wrote this here. Can't find anything. But anyways, he's the type of person, he's hot and cold, hot and cold. So sometimes he's fully there, totally loves her, and then he's disappeared. He's out of the picture. She's looking for him everywhere. She has no clue where he is. So he's the type of person who is, kind of emotionally avoidant. He's sometimes here, sometimes not. I mean, he's the perfect person that, we, as a friend, would, tell the girl, please, he's not ready. Don't even try, right? He's also never there when she needs him. I mean, this girl goes through a lot of trauma. First with her brothers, and we saw also with the watchman of the city. Where is he? Where is the boyfriend, right? When he finally enters the picture, it's aggressive. It's, there's no real sensibility to her consent, to her agency. And then finally he cheats on her. I mean, he's a nightmare, right? He's the perfect nightmare So he's also making every mistake in the book, to be honest. So these are two really, really flawed human beings. And we forget this when we always, we're quoting the Song of Songs in weddings, like it's the perfect love story. It's not. It's a very, very broken love story between two very, very broken people who transgress, who break not only with cultural norms, but perhaps even with biblical norms. Certainly the man does when it comes to infidelity. So if I had been the writer of this, and I wanted to write a treatise of sex education, a biblical treatise on sex education, I would have made sure that these two fail. So, as a lesson, see what happens when you rush through things, and see what happens when you're unfaithful, and see what happens when you're breaking all the rules and not listening to anyone. There you go. That's the result. But it's so beautiful to me that the writer of this story, rather than giving them what they deserve, actually gives them a completely unmerited success. They end up with a love, and I quote, which is as strong as death. Song of Songs, chapter 8, verse 6. This is completely unmerited. Neither of them deserve such a powerful love. And by the way, in the text, I didn't mention this before, but you have an expression that this love is coming from the fire of God. So this is not just a human love. This is, in a way, divine love, which is flowing between them in the story. And you wonder why in the world would God be there flowing between these two very flawed characters? So it's an absolutely unmerited love. They don't deserve it. And we wonder, why in the world is the author choosing to give them this type of ending? I mean, I think this is very bad pedagogically, right? This is inciting people to be like these two, thinking, oh, well, we'll get it. In the end, it'll be okay, right? This is, for me, it's a very dangerous story, right? And by the way, the rabbis knew this. And for a while, there was a discussion about banning the book, about even withdrawing it from the biblical text. And it's interesting. One rabbi stood up. I think I mentioned this. I'm not sure. I forgot. But one rabbi stood up in this assembly that was discussing whether the Song of Songs should remain in the Bible, should be studied, should be read. And he said, you guys don't understand this book. This book is actually the Holy of Holies. And you have to understand what that means. The Holy of Holies is the place in the tabernacle, in the temple, where you come to worship God. It is that place where no one can enter, because it is there where the very presence of God resides. It's the Holy of Holies. He's basically saying this story is the place, is extremely holy, because it is the place where God resides. And I would like to argue, I would like to suggest that this story is holy and is the very place, the very dwelling of God, precisely because it is a story about divine love and divine grace. In other words, our God is a God of grace who gives us what we don't deserve, right? So I really believe that's why this story is so holy, and that's why this story is considered to be the very dwelling place of the divine presence, because it is ultimately a story about grace. It is a story which teaches us that love cannot be conjured, it cannot be earned, it cannot be magnetized, it cannot be attracted, it cannot be forced, it cannot be coerced. Love is always a gift. And by the way, once we realize this, it is such a relief to realize that it doesn't ultimately hang on my efforts, which are anyways pathetic. And anyways, you cannot make it happen. Love is ultimately a gift. And so the big question here, well, before I get to the big question, let's talk a little bit, let me develop this idea that love is a grace. There's three things we need to understand when we understand love as a grace, as a gift. First of all, first thing we learn is that love as a grace, we realize that love is not anymore the prerogative of the virtuous. In other words, we have been taught in many conservative settings that you have to be pure, you have to keep yourself pure, you have to follow these rules in order to obtain a holy marriage, a pure marriage, right? In other words, your virtue if you remain virtuous, you will then obtain true love. And if you lose your virtue, if you don't keep yourself pure, well, yeah, sure, you'll get married, but it's not going to be the same, right? And so this story is going against this idea. The idea that love is something that you can only obtain through virtue is not a biblical idea. The biblical idea is that love is a gift that is unmerited. And this story is teaching us this. It's not, we have been taught all too often that losing one's virginity, neglecting to follow the script, having premarital sex, being unfaithful is going to ruin all possibilities of a beautiful love story. This story stands as a witness that this is not necessarily the case, that there is hope, that there is always a possible redemption, and that ultimately love is not something you can earn through your virtue. It is a gift that comes to the ones who precisely don't merit this experience. Another way that we can understand love as a grace is that ultimately what we learn in the Song of Songs is that love is not something that we can make happen or magnetize through our seductiveness, in the sense of, I have to look a certain way, I have to have this amount of charisma, I have to do these steps in order to attract love. This goes against everything that our culture teaches, especially when it comes to men. I see this much more now with men. I heard a funny story about, it was so great. It was a male influencer who did a lot of plastic surgery in order to look perfect. And he did look great. And this guy went to France and he thought, I look amazing. I have money. I mean, it's a no-brainer. The women will fall at my feet. Now in France, it's a little different because we are attracted not just to looks, but to charisma, to personality, to intellect. You can't do plastic surgery on your brain. That hasn't happened yet. So the guy would come and he would get rejected over and over again by French women because I mean, that's not what we're looking for. So there is this idea, especially in the manosphere, that you have to look a certain way. I mean, we have it too as women, obviously. I mean, we've had it for centuries. Now it's their turn. You have to look a certain way. You have to have a certain amount of money. You have to be the top. I don't know what they call it, but you have to be that top 1% that is, these kind of attractive males in order to obtain love. What the Song of Songs is teaching us is that love doesn't depend on your looks, doesn't depend on your money. It's something that ultimately comes to you unmerited, right? So I think this is beautiful teaching in that sense, right? And finally, what we learn in the Song of Songs is that you cannot, by your own efforts, fix a love that has gone wrong, right? Too often when the passion in our relationships begins to wane, when the temptation of infidelity looms, we kind of scramble to fix things. We scramble to find the right therapist or the right book. We try to set the right intention. We want to find the right prayer warrior to sustain us, or we find the right saint to pray to. Or we might try to get creative in the bedroom and kind of have some crazy ideas as to how to spice things up, which might actually threaten the relationship rather than heal it. But in any case, we scramble and we try to fix. And what the story again teaches us is that we cannot in our own efforts fix the relationship. The healing of the relationship is also a grace. And so if it is indeed a grace that we can only receive, then my question is, of course, as I'm reading the text, is, well, what can a woman do? Still do, you see, it's hard to get it out of my mindset, but what can we do to position ourselves? How might we position ourselves to receive this grace? Because, gifts are available all the time, but very often we miss those gifts because we are not aligned in the right way or positioned in the right way. So my question immediately is, as I'm investigating this and exploring this notion of grace in the Song of Songs, is how might a woman position herself to receive such an unmerited love? And so here again, our Shulamit is going to help us. So when we go back to everything that we've learned from the Shulamit, there is actually a constant, there's a common denominator, there's a guiding thread throughout all of her actions. And I would like to to argue that this guiding thread is her ability, each time there's a crisis, to eventually enter into a state of rest. It is to the degree that we are capable as women to rest and to enter a place of stillness and of surrender that we will become open to grace and to the gift, to love as something that is gifted. And so I want us to look back now, to go back to all of these moments that the Shulamit has gone through in her journey, and to really identify each time when she actually took that step into rest, so that we can learn with her also to practice this restfulness when it comes to love. So remember, in one of the early chapters, we learned that before the Shulamit could even be attractive, um, she had to emerge first, or seductive, she had to emerge as her own person, connected to her heart and to her voice and to her desires, her feelings. And so the first thing we need to do when we want to find love is generally still all the voices around us. Stop trying to live up to a script that is not that of your own heart, right? So there's a moment of stillness here when the Shulamit begins to still all the voices around her, the voices of patriarchy. We saw the voices of neo-patriarchy, the voices of our family, our culture, our religion, and really begin in the stillness that we create, find a way back to our own hearts and to our own desires and to our own feminine embodied wisdom. So this is the first moment, right? When the Shulamit enters into this place of stillness and rest and reconnects to her own embodied wisdom. We cannot connect to our body and to our feelings if our mind is going constantly. There are voices in our head that are not our voice telling us what we should be doing. We have to still these voices and connect to our own embodied wisdom. So the second thing that she does, of course, when it comes to the beginnings of a relationship, the seduction, she really learns very quickly to open up a place of stillness, right? She connects to her desire, but at the same time she knows that she has to be still, not try to make an impression or give him her number or do this, do that in order to get his attention, wear this, wear that. She knows it's enough for me to connect to my desire, to have to actually admit to myself that I'm attracted to this man. And of course, be natural, right? Of course, if the situation makes it that you meet on the streets, you say hi, right? But you're not going to go out to, right? You allow, in a way, life to orchestrate things for you. You don't have to go out and do things. You know that if this love is meant to be, it will be orchestrated for you. And you can just rest, waiting for these moments of encounter to happen, or waiting for the man eventually to make his way towards you. So there's really here a deep restfulness right from the start that the Shulamit understands is the best path forward, so that in a way she creates a space now for her beloved to choose her, right? It's very important, this respect of the man's agency. Too often we bypass that because we know we have that power to bypass the man's consent, because it is sometimes very difficult for the men to resist our absolutely beautiful selves. So we very often bypass that and we kind of rush in the relationship, and the man often will fall into the relationship without having really decided he wants to be there, just because it's accessible, it's easy. Um, there's a very cynical story that a friend of mine told me. I was asking him, why is it that men date women that they don't necessarily love? Like, why? Like, for me, that was a mystery. Like, why would you do that? Like, and he gave me this absolutely cynical image. He said, well, women are like pizza, right? It's better, of course, a nice hot pizza than in a restaurant with candlelight. But if you're hungry and in the fridge there is cold pizza, you're gonna eat cold pizza, right? And enjoy it to a certain degree. So we need to be aware that men very often will fall for us even if they haven't chosen us. Right? So it's very important, if we want to have a lasting relationship, that the man has this space to choose us. And we offer him this space by entering stillness, rest, I let life orchestrate our encounters, or God, right? And I give you the space to choose me. So stillness is the number one mode of operation when it comes to initiating the relationship, right? Then we see the Shulamit navigating infidelity also with restfulness. In other words, when she begins to suspect what is happening, rather than go ballistic and, become like erupt in a tantrum, or, start to, move into detective mode, she grows very still. Right? This is always the best thing, because in this type of emotion, you are going to say things and do things that are not you, right? So it's very important at that moment, in the moment of betrayal, to grow very still. Just do nothing, right? Anything you're going to do is going to be catastrophic at that moment, because the emotion is so powerful. The rage and the frustration and the despair is going to be the source of your action rather than your embodied wisdom. Right now, you are flooded with negative emotions, with voices that are not your own. So growing very still until the stillness is reestablished, then you can connect to your embodied wisdom as to how you're going to navigate this. Should I separate? Should we have a conversation? Whatever your body will say. So she grows very still, and at the same time, she lets him go. Knowing, again, she enters a place of rest, meaning I'm not going to strive to make you stay. I'm going to again create the space for you to choose me, perhaps again, a second time. So she releases him, opens up the space of his consent, renewed agency, and then she rests in the knowledge that if this man is hers, he will come back, and if he is not, it's okay. That means it was never meant to be, right? And finally, when it comes to um, making love, right, that the Shulamit understands also that it's not so much about learning to make love to a man and to, put on this persona and be this seductress or whatever. It's about learning also as a woman to be made love to. We have become such active agents of our lives everywhere that even in the bedroom, we think we got to do this and do this and do that. No, what really is needed is for us to learn to receive in the bedroom and to be made love to learn not only to how to give pleasure, but how to receive it. The woman who is capable of doing that is the woman who rests in the knowledge that she's enough. She doesn't have to put on a show in order to please her man. She is enough, and there's no need to perform in order to secure her man's love. So rather than anxiously trying to meet his needs in the bedroom, which is not a bad thing, but she also knows how to receive his love joyfully and gratefully, whatever he is bringing to the table. Sometimes, it's not what we expect, but it is still possible to gain enjoyment from something that surprises us, right? So it's really this notion of receiving joyfully and gratefully that man and whatever he's offering you, knowing that ultimately the man the man's highest pleasure in the bedroom is actually the pleasure of knowing that he is giving us pleasure. So learning to really enjoy that man is really, and resting and learning to be made love to rather than to actively try to control the situation is also the idea of rest. So I think you're seeing now how the Shulamit starts out very anxious, very desperate, very clingy, very controlling. And little by little, she learns to enter a place of stillness, of rest, which is in a way the essence of femininity. So she really, learns to align herself with her feminine essence, which is rest. So that's really what I believe we can learn here. We cannot, as long as we're in the striving mode and trying to manipulate and force and fix and repair and control and manage, you can't do that with love, because love is not something you can earn. Love is always a gift. The only way to receive that gift is to rest, open oneself up, wait, and hope, right? So ultimately, this rest is what is the woman that can rest like this is a woman which has also connected to her deep humility. In other words, it takes humility to rest in this way. The humility to realize, and let's look at what the word humility means. Humility comes from the Latin word humus, which means earth, right? When a woman finally realizes, I am just earth, I am powerless, I don't have control over this, I am not in charge. I am not this, expert and, this goddess that, should be, steering everything and controlling and fixing and managing. I'm just earth. I can't do this. I don't have what it takes. The moment a woman comes to this realization is the moment when she's ready to receive everything back that she has lost, if that thing, of course, is for her. So, this is ultimately where our Shulamit is leading us. She's leading us back to our earthiness, to the fact that we are earth, that we are not superheroes, we are not managers, we are not goddesses, we are human. We are clay, we are fragile, and we are powerless in many ways. And it is at that moment that we step into, finally back into our humanity, that we are ready to receive love. So ultimately, what the Shulamit is doing is reversing the journey of Eve. So let me tell you a little bit about that. So remember in the very first, I think, introduction, when I introduced the book, we talked about Eve and how the Shulamit is in a way the antidote to Eve. If you remember Eve in the story of the Garden of Eden, when she's faced with a tree and the fruit which is not hers to have, she nevertheless grasps onto this fruit, takes it because she wants to be a goddess. That's in essence Eve. The Shulamit is reversing this, right? From grasping, Eve is grasping, the Shulamit is releasing, right? Over and over again, she has to learn to let go. Where Eve is in a way striving towards this higher state of being a goddess, the Shulamit is teaching us to rest and to receive. And finally, where Eve actually is in her pride, trying to be more than she is, to be a goddess, to be in control, to master the situation. The Shulamit teaches us humility, that ultimately love is not in our control. We can only receive it or receive it back. And so what I'm seeing here is in a way, the Shulamit in a way is the new Eve. She's showing us the way back to Eden, where everything was always given to us. In the Garden of Eden, there was no need to, to work hard, to strive, to do this. The fruits were hanging everywhere around us. We just had to pick and receive. So what marks the the worldview of the Garden of Eden is a worldview of I am just a creature made from the earth and I'm receiving the abundance that the Creator has given me. The Shulamit is leading us back into this world where everything is already given to us. And we are being taught how to embody again our clay bodies, how to become again a creature, and as such, how to again open ourselves up to the abundance of the Creator and to the grace of love. So it's ultimately a beautiful story. We're coming full circle where we're seeing here, this is a redemptive story. This is showing us how to be another kind of woman. Eve showed us the way into disaster, into ruin. And the Shulamit, in a way, is showing us the way back into redemption, renewal, and restoration. So I hope you enjoyed the journey. I did. I very much enjoyed teaching this. And I'm going to be trying to make a kind of more conversational book based on these lectures, which will, I don't know when it will come out, but keep your eyes open. But definitely you still have right now the actual book, which I don't have right now in my hands, but it's the actual more complicated academic book called Womanist Wisdom in the Song of Songs. So if you have time and you have and you enjoy reading a little bit more difficult writing, that although I don't think it's too difficult, but some people have told me it's legible, but really check it out and see It will go, of course, much deeper than these lectures, and I hope but this has been amazing for me also. Let's meet again one more time for the appendix of this work, and which I have entitled, Is God a Woman? So I will see you then in a bit.